Welcome to Forum 360 with a global outlook and a local view. I'm Brian Murphy, your host. What is it about the Nutcracker that has endured the test of time? Why has it become such a tradition? Every year, go to the theater and you watch a local performance of the Nutcracker. Why is that? Why is the music so ingrained in us? We go to the store and you hear the Flowers music. If you don't know what that is, you will find out soon. Or the Sugar Plums. Well, today we have a special guest. She's been performing for many years. She's been doing the Nutcracker for over 27 years. Megan Coleman Stuart, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I have to ask you, and I ask all my friends this, and what is the first thing in your mind when you think of the Nutcracker?
Well, you said it first, tradition. I mean,
Yes.
It's a holiday tradition not only for me, but for so many families throughout the world.
It is. So what is it about the tradition in your mind, in your point of view, why has it endured this test?
You know, it's one of those things that you can go and be lost in the theater, but not only that, it's during the best time of the year. It's during Christmas. The scenery, the setting is that it's Christmas in the 1800s. And it kind of just transports you back to a simpler time. And the story is just such a sweet and endearing story that I think everybody can kind of relate to and dream about like when they were younger.
The story. So here we have, it's a simple story about this girl at a party. And continuing on with the story, tell us all about the story.
So Clara is having a party with her parents, or her parents is throwing the party, I should say. And her uncle, Herr Drosselmeyer, comes and presents her with this doll, the Nutcracker. And she loves this doll. Her brother is mischievous and breaks the doll, but then her magical uncle, the Drosselmeyer, fixes it. And after the party winds down, she comes downstairs and starts this dream sequence of there's a battle between the Nutcracker and the toy soldiers, and the mice come in and the Rat King, and they battle. And in the end, the Mouse King kind of beats the Nutcracker, but then he turns into this prince.
But before we do that, though, Clara is all scared.
Oh, yeah.
She starts in this, like on a couch, and she gets up. It's dark, and she's running around and looking for something, and she sees the Nutcracker. And then she holds on to it for dear life. Oh, this is my sweet thing. And these mice are running around her. At the end of the battle, she gets all courageous again, and she throws something at the mice, the Rat King, and the Nutcracker, kills the Rat King.
Right.
And done. What a story.
It is, and I think something that we also left out is that during this whole time, Drosselmeyer is watching over what is going on, and he basically shrinks her down to the size of the doll.
Yes.
So it's kind of, it's like a fairy tale kind in that sense, but
and these big rats come out.
and then they're all life size. Everything is
correct.
her size. She's the size of a doll.
Interesting, isn't it? And then suddenly it becomes another scene. What's after that then?
Then comes the snow scene. So it depends on which version you're doing. There's a Snow King and Queen. I've done a version where there is no Snow King and there's just a Snow Queen. And there's usually a pas de deux, or dance for two, done to the snow music. And in the versions that I've done, there's been a Snow King and Queen pas de deux, but there's also been a Clara and Prince pas de deux.
Yes, and the prince is like the Nutcracker.
Yes.
The Nutcracker becomes this life-size person who Clara dances with, and they're all happy because they're in a good place. So,
right.
And then we go into the second act.
Yes. So then we go into the second act, and Clara is greeted by all of the sweets, the divertissement. So you have the coffee from the Arabian.
Yes.
Arabian is coffee.
Yes.
Hot chocolate is the Spanish. So Spanish comes first. Yes. And then we have tea from China, the flowers. Russian is sometimes it's done as peppermint.
Yes.
And then the Mother Ginger.
Mother
Can't
Ginger.
forget Mother Ginger.
Can't
Everyone
forget
loves Mother Ginger.
They do, yes.
And the Polichinelles, or Ginger Snaps. When I was, that was my first role in the Nutcracker, was a ginger snap, a baby ginger snap. I was 5 years old.
5 years old. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yes, 5 years old, coming out from under the skirt.
Yes.
And then the grand finale is the Sugar Plum Fairy and the Cavalier.
So we look at the Nutcracker and try to figure out why this has just been a big deal in our lives. And you talk to anybody, they always, when you say the Nutcracker, yeah, I've gone to the ballet for a long time. You know, it's something that my families have been doing. If you look at the premise of it, the nationalities, the good versus evil, it all kind of, it fits.
And I feel like it's timeless in that sense, because with everything that's going on in our world and has been going on for, hundreds of years or thousands of years, there's always that good and evil, hopefully good prevailing. It's also all-encompassing, it's incorporating all of these different nationalities, which brings in all different traditions.
Yes.
So I feel like in that sense, that's maybe why people love it so much, is that the story is timeless itself.
It is. And then when you go to the theater, if you notice, kids are always engaged. You know what I mean? They go there and they're watching. You have like the costumes.
Oh, there's so much to look at.
Right? And the music's so beautiful. Oh. Even though we've listened to it for so many years, it's still beautiful.
It is. It's one of my, I know that actually we were discussing beforehand the history of the Nutcracker, and Tchaikovsky actually hated this score. Which I find
fascinating,
very fascinating and kind of funny, because that's what people know. They know Tchaikovsky did the Nutcracker and he did Swan Lake. Like, those are the two that people know the most. But I feel Nutcracker, for everybody, whether they're a dancer or not, it holds a special place.
It does. So the holiday season start, you walk into a store and you hear dun 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 dun, ba-da-dum, bum, bum,
or the Russians on any car commercial.
Yes, right? Or, okay, so talking about you now and talking about the Nutcracker and the roles, but I want to tell everybody what we have on set here, because I want to get into your roles and what you've been doing. So why don't you talk about what we have on set? Okay.
All right. Well, this is my tutu that I use for guestings for the Sugar Plum Fairy.
The Sugar Plum Fairy?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can see that there's layers upon layers.
I want to get it out and show. So here we have this.
It's a little bit, I was saying beforehand, it's a little bit smushed because it was, it hasn't been hanging up the right way. But this is a classical tutu. They come in different varieties. So you have the classical tutu, which is the platter tutu, and then you also have a romantic tutu, which is about mid-shin.
So platter tutu romantic. Maybe a bit more specific.
Yes. So this is the platter tutu.
Platter tutu. And there's different layers.
There's many different layers of tulle. And so this one has a little bit of shimmer on the bottom so that when the light hits it, it's very, very pretty. And then different colors of pink to just bring out more depth to the skirt.
Great. And then a platter, would that be a little flat?
A little flatter,
a little flatter, so it'd be almost like this.
Right. Right.
Excellent.
Sometimes they put a hoop underneath them to make sure that they can hold the weight of all of the different layers.
So, Megan, what is it like to wear one of these?
I really love it.
Do you?
I do. Yes. Because, why else would a little girl want to become a ballerina,
Exactly.
You get to wear beautiful dresses and all of these gorgeous headpieces, and it's funny because I say I get to play dress up for a living.
Oh, interesting. So here we have the Nutcracker, and these girls are going to the Nutcracker, and they see you walk out on stage. How does that make you, as a performer, feel that you are having an influence on these kids?
There's really nothing like it. It's hard to put into words, because that was what changed my course of life, is seeing my first Nutcracker and saying, I want to do that. But it actually wasn't the Sugar Plum, it was Clara.
It was? So what's the difference? Okay, so what's the difference between Clara and the Sugar Plum? Tell me, let's talk about each one of those characters.
So Clara is usually played by a younger student. Some companies, professional companies, use their professionals that are younger and shorter and can appear as a younger girl. But for most home studios, it's a little girl that plays around like 12 years old. And she's kind of the story revolves around her. She's the one who gets the doll. She gets to have this amazing dream and all of these exciting experiences throughout. So that was what I really dreamt about as a little girl, because I didn't really notice or realize that it can evolve. That dream of being Clara, once I was Clara for 6 years. It evolved.
You were Clara for 6 years?
I was Clara for 6 years.
Wow.
Actually, my studio, where I grew up at, they had a younger Clara. So from 12 and 13, I was the younger Clara. And then when I was 14, I was the Snow Queen. And after that, they didn't really have another group of younger students coming up. So they did one of the more professional type of Nutcrackers, where they made it as a role that was incorporated throughout the whole ballet. So I danced not only in the party scene, I also did with the ginger snaps and the flowers. And,
oh yeah, you did a lot. You had a lot of
yeah.
dancing for the Clara. So moving from Clara to Sugar. Let's talk about these shoes we have here. I have never personally been in them. Okay.
That's surprised. I'm actually very surprised.
Yeah, some guys do.
Yes.
What are they called?
They're the point shoes.
These are point shoes. Typically, Sugar does the always on a point. And talk about why. Maybe let's talk about why they're on point.
Well, point shoes, going back to when they were created for the sylph ballets. And a sylph is a fairy, a woodland fairy. So it was created for those ballets that had more of an ethereal feel to them. Giselle, Les Sylphides, they're all ballets that are about fairies.
Yeah, right. Yes.
So it's more of, it was to give it an ethereal feel. So she was gliding across the stage, as opposed to, walking like a normal person.
Right.
So, because,
yes.
how else would you make it, how would we know it's a fairy,
Correct. Yes.
So they wanted her to glide across. And in the beginning, it wasn't very many things that they could do on point shoes, because they were very soft. They were more like a flat shoe with some darning. So when they started making the shoes harder, the expectations became much greater of what you would be able to do on those
So let's
shoes.
talk about what's inside this point shoe here.
See, my shoe is a little bit different than the normal shoe, because I wear a gainer mendon.
You do?
Yes.
So here we're talking today about the Nutcracker. Megan Coleman Stuart is with us talking about the Nutcracker, and we are just about to venture into what is in a point shoe. And on set we have a tutu. We've been talking about that. A pink tutu, what typically would wear for Sugar Plum. And we've been talking about the differences between Clara and a Sugar Plum, because I think as young dancers, young girl dancers, they dream about being Clara, but then at the end of the Nutcracker, this Sugar Plum comes out, and then there's this feeling that, I want to be Sugar Plum. And you buy tutus, you put it on, you walk around with it. So I want to talk a little about the point shoes and what you have in your point shoes.
Okay, so this is the point shoe. Mine is actually different than your traditional point shoe. Many point shoes are made of different layers upon layers upon layers of canvas and shellac and leather and suede. And then they'll do those many layers, and then they'll bake them in an oven. And that's what makes them hard. Contrary to popular belief, they're not made of wood.
And are they made specifically for you? Now, do you have a maker?
I actually do not, because I wear a gainer mendon. So actually, my shoe is much different than a traditional shoe, because it's actually made more of a plastic substance.
Because of your feet.
Yes. So it's just a different type of shoe. These are made in the U.S. A lot of the other shoes are made overseas. And it's more of a revolutionary type of shoe, because it's not that traditional way of baking them in the oven and then they eventually wear down and become very soft. These shoes never become soft.
Oh, because it's right, they wear out.
Right.
So a big thing about point shoes, and just to say what you're saying, is that a lot of times when you wear them, they get soft and they get hard. they've been.
We say they die.
They die. Yeah, well, they still pound.
Very dramatic.
And very dramatic.
They're dead.
And everybody has their own way. So maybe, what advice would you give a young girl who's aspiring to be a dancer to get in one of these? What advice would you give them?
It also depends for someone to get their pointe shoes on their growth plates in their feet. The bones in the feet are very much like cartilage. They're a little bit softer when you're younger. So you have to be of a certain age and strength level in order to get your first pair of pointe shoes.
And maybe, before we walk away from the Clara and Sugar, what advice would you give a Clara who is aspiring to be a Sugar, or a young girl who wants to be Clara? What would you, if I was sitting right here, I was a young girl and I wanted your advice, what would that be?
You're going to have to work really hard, and you're going to have to love it, because Clara in itself is an acting role on top of the dancing. She carries the whole show. So if you are a great dancer, you definitely have to show also that you love it when you're dancing, because you can have the feet and the legs and all of that good stuff, but if you're not able to show how much you love this Nutcracker, show how scared you are of the rats and all of this other stuff, it won't really it won't come across as a Clara.
I totally agree with you.
It's more about a personality on top of talent.
I actually think Nutcracker is an acting ballet.
Yes.
More than anything else. I was talking to my kids, and I said, when you're a rat, you have to be the rat. You're not a human being out there. And
Not a human being, a rat.
You're a rat.
Right.
Correct. And I think that the audiences want to feel like they're walking into this fairy tale. And when they watch, the reason why they don't fidget, the reason why they get engaged is because the dancers are showing something that's kind of ridiculous if you think about it.
Yes.
But it's not, though. It's pure fairy tale. And people are watching want to escape. They want to be able to go to the theater and know that they can escape for the 2 hours. And the Nutcracker has been that tradition for over 100 years. So the advice is to work hard.
Work hard.
Personality is essential to be Claire and Sugar. Talk about other roles. Now, what is your particular favorite role?
My favorite role was Clara.
It was Clara?
Yeah. But now that I'm older and I've had all of these life experiences, and I have done every single role in the Nutcracker.
Every single one of them? Including Russian?
I was Russian, yes.
Chinese?
I was Chinese. That was one of my first point roles, was Chinese. Yes,
Cool.
But now obviously Sugar Plum holds a very special place in my heart.
Got it. So I wanted to talk about you as a dancer, and because I think it's important to know what kind of work it takes to be able to be in these type of roles. So when you're rehearsing Sugar, how often do you rehearse?
Well, it's actually different for me now than it was a few years ago. I have relocated back to this area. I started my professional career with Ballet Theatre of Ohio, and actually with Brian Murphy as one of my good partners. So I was with Ballet Theatre of Ohio for a couple of years, and then I moved to Lexington, Kentucky, and I was a principal dancer with the Lexington Ballet for 6. After that, I met my husband and had a baby, and life changes. So
wow, it's great. And you're still dancing though.
Yes.
What was it like to have a baby and then get back to dancing again? And literally, you're doing the Sugar Plum in a couple weeks, in the weekend of Thanksgiving and the week after.
Yes.
So talk about that transition, having a baby into this.
Well, I had my son in January, and actually we were discussing before that was the only Nutcracker I've ever missed. So
wow.
It did not feel...
After how many years?
That would have been 24.
24 years. Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of Nutcrackering. And everyone, when we start the music, all the dancers are like, oh gosh, the Nutcracker music. But for me, it gave me this new appreciation and love for it, because that was a year I missed. and it just didn't feel it didn't feel like Christmas.
Right. Yes.
So after that, after I had my son, it took a lot of hard work to get back into it because I also had a C-section. And for a dancer, your core is everything. So having that traumatic experience for your core, it was a lot. So it took a lot of hard work, a lot of Pilates, a lot of ballet classes, and going to the gym and just trying to get my stamina back up.
So speaking of being a dancer in Nutcracker season, a lot of times in the Nutcracker season we are traveling, and when people go see a show, you see these professionals. They're there for that show. There's a lot going into it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and I'm a dancer and you want to give advice for a guest dancer, if you wanted to give advice to be a guest dancer, what would you say to them?
For me right now, I'm a freelance artist. I'm not associated with any companies. So just having the discipline to make sure you're in class every day and make sure you're going to the gym to have the stamina to get through. I mean, this is, 11 and a half, 12, depending on the tempo.
Yes.
Depending on the tempo, 12-minute piece.
It is.
And for the female especially, I mean, the men do their job too.
Of course.
Because they're, lifting us and making us look pretty. But we go from a, 6-7 minute pas de deux. You have a 50-second variation. And then we have a 2.5 minute variation.
And then we go into the finale.
Right into a coda, which is another 2 minutes. And into the finale of the whole entire show. So just having the stamina to push and make sure that you can get through it is a lot.
I mean, staying healthy, eating healthy, taking class every day.
Oh yes.
And taking care of your body. I think when you travel from city to city, you're in the car or maybe flying, different time zones, you gotta be able to take care of your body.
It's so crucial.
It's crucial.
I mean, your body is your instrument.
It really is. And to have a high level of performance, so that you create, because the people who come see you, they want to feel what you're feeling, but they also want to go, I can't do that. This is amazing. Also, and it's hard to maintain that for a long period of time, but you have to.
Yes.
So I have a couple questions. These are, I call it the speed round.
Okay.
Okay. So what did you have for dinner last night?
For dinner last night? I don't know if I should say that.
Go ahead.
We were traveling back from Las Vegas, and I was coming through Detroit, so I had a coney dog.
A coney dog? That's great. That's
yes,
fine. You're allowed to.
It's very Detroit.
It's very Detroit.
I'm back on the training plan
you
now.
are? Okay. Perfect. So you have one child.
I do.
And what's his name and how old?
Ethan, and he is going to be 4 in January.
Excellent. Do you have any pets?
We have 2 dogs. Alf is a Bichon Yorkie, and Penny is a Bichon Cavalier King Charles mix. So little yappy things.
Nice. So how long have you been dancing professionally?
I have been dancing professionally for 11 years.
11 years. What is the most satisfying component of being a professional dancer?
Performing. I love class, but performing is just so rewarding. Again, I've been doing so many storybook ballets lately, just being back in the area, there's a lot more work for that type of stuff when you're freelancing. So just being able to portray these, I've done Cinderella and The Little Mermaid recently, and being able to portray these characters that I loved growing up as a child, now like performing for other children, it's really fun.
So as a young dancer, and where you are now, did you know that you would be here? Did you imagine yourself being a professional dancer at 12?
I knew I didn't want to stop, and I knew that that's where my heart was. I chose to do this at a very young age. So when I was 12, that was my first summer with American Ballet Theater, and ever since then, it was every summer I was gone for a summer intensive. Every single night I was in the studio for multiple hours. So I don't think it's something that you can just decide at 18 years old that, oh yeah, I think I want to be a professional ballet dancer. It's something that you have to work toward. I mean, for hours, you would know.
Correct.
Hours upon hours of hard work in the studio. And then
It
it's
really
still,
is, actually.
you never know because it's very
Correct.
hard.
So if you have, and I was looking at some stats, and really there's hundreds of thousands of dancers out there in studios everywhere. And studios provide such an outlet for these kids. It's so important. But it's also important to aspire, to be able to aspire to.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think the Nutcracker does that. Even though they may not be a dancer, they feel like they, even if they're rehearsed and they're doing it in a local studio, they may not want to be a professional, but they look at what they could potentially become. And Sugar Plum for girls. And you need to hope that as a dancer, male dancer, males see me lift girls over the head, and we're jumping, and we're turning.
Talk about athleticism. I mean, really.
All the above. I think men, women, both. Very athletic. And those thousands of people in each community come see that local Nutcracker. And just to finish off with that, it's so important, this tradition. We didn't talk about tradition. It's been such an important part of our community. So thank you, Megan Coleman, for coming today. And I'm Brian Murphy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Forum 360 is brought to you by Electrical Impulse Communications, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, an anonymous donor, the Jewish Community Board of Akron, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Blue Green, and Forum 360 supporters.